Everyone. For those of you who had a bit of time to spend with us on the bus tour, I hope you enjoyed it and were as enlightened as I think the rest of us were in terms of the fantastic city that we have, highlighting, of course, some of the amazing opportunities that our city holds, some of the challenges that we're facing, some of the natural assets that we have, some of the built heritage that we have, the natural heritage. It really was an amazing tour. And I think that most councillors, in fact, all councillors said that they quite enjoyed it and were happy to have spent the day doing that or invested the day in having that tour. And I do have to say, one of the things that I note is that we spent pretty much the entire day on a bus touring our city, and we didn't see every inch of our city by far. We were able to touch all of the wards for sure, but an entire day on a bus, save for a small lunch break and a bit of a stop off, if you will, at the water and wastewater treatment plant down on Woodward, we really were on that bus for a long time. And that just is, I think, one of the things I wanted to highlight as a kind of an overall. We have a very diverse city made up of many, many communities and many unique neighborhoods. And today was the chance for folks to get a sense of that, so that as we go through these next couple of years and talk about some of the issues that the ward councillors will be raising on behalf of their communities, folks will perhaps have a bit of context that they might not have had had we not made this effort. So on that note, I know that the route was published and the stops that we didn't do many stops, but certainly the highlights that we looked at are available. So if there are any questions that folks have, I'm happy to respond to them. And I think we've been joined by Councillor Alex Wilson, who is the councillor for Ward 13. Thanks for joining us. And just so folks know, we did let councillors know that they're welcome to join in if they're interested in doing so. So go ahead, Jan, take it over.
Thank you so much, Mayor Horwath, and welcome, Councillor Wilson. We'll turn it over now to media for questions. We'll begin with one question and one follow-up from each reporter on the line. If time permits, we'll do a second round of questions. So in order of RSVPs for this afternoon, I will go first to Nathan Sager in the Hammer. Nathan, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Of course I'd be the first to get back. Maybe I'll start for Alex Wilson. What was illuminating for you, especially as a councillor out in Dundas, seeing maybe the areas in the downtown of the city and maybe talking to people?
Yeah, I mean, I've lived downtown. I've been a tenant downtown, so it wasn't new to me. I did share with Councillor Wang after that I felt like I learned the most about Ward 4 on the trip, just from combination of seeing the water treatment plant and her kind of touring. But I'll say, and like where I had previously been inexperienced, but I think there's a real mix of wanting to hit the ground running on the urgent issues we were elected on, and really, really hitting the ground. And I think this was a really exciting opportunity, and really thankful that the mayor kind of made this a priority and put this forward, that we got a chance to work with each other and see what that common ground is before maybe jumping into it. So I know it's always a bit of a balance, and I'm definitely one of the folks who's ready to hit the ground running when it comes to motions and legislative process. But I really appreciated taking the time to slow down a bit today, learn from our colleagues across the city what matters most to them in their communities and their wards, and see what the commonalities are. I think that was actually the most surprising, or what did I learn most, was how much we have in common, and how a suburban area in Ward 13 is very similar to a suburban area in other parts of the city. An urban area in Ward 13 is very similar to urban areas in the rest of the city. We have common struggles, and when in addressing those struggles, we can learn from each other's best practices. So really, really grateful that this was a priority coming from our mayor.
Yeah, and for Mayor Horwath, maybe too as well. How valuable is this, especially with a council that's more than half, I guess, people who are in new positions?
Well, that's a great question, Nathan, and I appreciate it. That was part of the reason why I tried to pull this together because we did have 2/3 of the council turnover, and you don't want to make assumptions about people's understanding of the the complexities, the diversities, as well as the commonalities that exist across our vast city. And so I appreciate Councillor Wilson's take on the tour. I think I think they are spot on when it comes to the experience that we all had. So it really was about acknowledging and recognizing and being thoughtful and respectful about the various people that are new to politics in one way or another, or new particularly to serving on city council. And I think it gives us a good base to start from as we go into the kinds of conversations that Councillor Wilson was referencing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Next, we'll go to Lisa Pileski with Global News Radio 900 CHML. Lisa, you can go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I hope you can hear me okay. So this question was going to be for basically any councillors who would like to speak up, but I'll actually ask Mayor Horwath as well. Did you hear or see anything today that made you kind of reevaluate your priorities for the upcoming budget discussions, or did it do the opposite and reaffirm goals that you already had in mind?
Well, I think what it did was give us a sense of the priorities that exist in the various wards, that although we talked about a little bit during orientation, I don't think we got the kind of the fabric of some of the priorities that are on the minds of the councillors. And so that's what it did for me, is provide some context, provide some depth, if you will, to some of those priorities. And I think what all of us need to acknowledge is that the priorities are significant. There are a lot of priorities, and we do have a limited capacity. And so by taking that opportunity to look at the city from a kind of a bird's eye view, if you will, or from a broader perspective, I think it will help us in those conversations because we do have some serious decisions to make, and some prioritization obviously happens throughout all aspects of the budget.
And I'd love to hear from Councillor Wilson on that as well.
I think just, again, on terms of common ground, I think it really reaffirmed how vital pedestrian safety and road safety is in just every corner of our ward. Folks who, I maybe wasn't expecting to hear that from them, like spoke really earnestly and with deep emotion about specific instances of traffic safety in their communities. I think that is really something that unites us all. I also think, I'll say the real value, and I really appreciated that many of the Greenbelt cuts and the forced urban boundary expansions being discussed as part of Bill 23 and some of the other legislative parts from the provincial government were on the tour, and, driving for 5 minutes and in a consistent 5 minutes going all this natural area, all this farmland that we're passing in this 5 minutes of traveling and many, dozens of kilometers an hour, you're covering such a large swath, that entire area being changed. Now how do we service that was a question that the ward councillor in that area was asking me. We don't have any existing infrastructure right here. Folks are unwell. Folks are not on our system right now. How can we put in all this infrastructure? Who pays for it? As well as what is the huge cost to losing all that farmland, all those wooded areas, the biodiversity we're seeing. And I think it really speaks to how the natural areas in our wards are also connected to make Hamilton natural system. And if we, start carving out sections of parts of our natural system, it has an impact in the whole system. So being able to see parts of that system, how they're connected, was so valuable. And I think your question was originally about priorities. I think really underscored, the existing conversations regarding both pedestrian safety, housing, and the impacts of provincial legislation like Bill 23.
Okay, thanks very much. And this is my follow-up, and I'll ask both of you as well to chime in. You were on a bus all day, so you were traveling Hamilton's roads. And so the question of road safety and traffic safety issues comes up. Just wondering if there were if it kind of highlighted any needs in the city that you noticed as you were driving around. Did you have any encounters that may have been a concern as you were traveling the roads, I suppose?
Well, that's another great question. And just following up on what Councillor Wilson was saying, it was really enlightening. The same concerns that exist in urban on urban streets, for example, are also the case on suburban streets and in smaller communities. So issues like bike lanes, for example, issues like fast traffic going along a street very close to pedestrians and creating a sense of lack of safety. Virtually every area of the city that we were in, the councillors were raising those kinds of issues. And yes, we saw folks cycling, for example, on Scenic Drive, where there was a very dangerous situation and it didn't, it needed to be improved. We drove in areas where public realm improvements have taken place and saw the difference in terms of the safety in those corridors. We saw places where some effort has been made or some progress has been made, but not enough progress. I think particularly Councillor Nan identified some of those things in Ward 3. So there's just no doubt that whether it's pedestrian safety, whether it's cycling infrastructure, whether it's making sure that our roadways are properly maintained. We went on a very bumpy Barton Street. There are some real consistencies all the way around. In fact, the fellow that was helping us with the video had an iPhone on a stand, and many times he had to stabilize the phone to prevent it from jumping up and down because of all of the bumpy roads. And so there's just no doubt that there's a lot of commonality, and we did actually see some of those pieces when it came to road safety upfront and personal.
Yeah, and I guess I just ask Councillor Wilson again if they have anything to add here.
I think that what really covered it was a whole scan of what we saw. I'll just add, speaking of the points of connection, we're pressured in Ward 13 in our urban and suburban areas around our arterials mostly. That's where a lot of those issues are. And hearing from other ward councillors, the work that has been done on their arterials historically, the work that is already planned, how complete street audits have been used in the wards that have done them to improve some of these things in a long-term process. It was just really valuable to see how similar problems have been solved or underway in other parts of the city. And so, yeah, I really, really appreciate the process today.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, we'll go to Tevia Morrow from the Hamilton Spectator. Tevia, you can go ahead.
Thanks very much. I think I'll ask the question. I think Mayor Horwath, you mentioned maybe some tough decisions ahead in terms of real policy changes or decision points. What do you think this bus tour may have highlighted? One thing that came to mind for me was area rating for transit, for example, or maybe further reform of our residential zoning. I don't want to lead you, but what sort of decision points might you be thinking of?
Well, I think that what the tour did is allow the councillors to describe the needs of their communities in that regard. And so you will recall that Councillor Tedison, I believe it was, talked about some communities that he represents that don't want to see any transit whatsoever. There were other instances where councillors talked about the fact that their business districts in their wards were very difficult for employers, for example, and workers to be able to successfully have a relationship. So in other words, employers finding employees or employees being able to get to a workplace without transit infrastructure. So that was all I think highlighted in a really important way. But one of the things that I think that I don't think of it so much as a decision point as I think of it as not dissimilar from what Councillor Wilson talked about, and that is the fact that that we have some things that have been a great success already, and we need to build on those things. And where there are opportunities to take advantage of the experiences that we've learned by implementing projects or implementing master plans or plans in various communities already, the blueprint can be utilized for other communities. And so there's no doubt there's going to be a vigorous discussion about the things like transit rating, area rating, and those pieces. But one of the things I think that we all agree upon coming out of today's bus tour is that we're one city, and we have to make sure that we are, knitting together, if you will, the various communities that make Hamilton a city. It's 22 years since amalgamation happened, and we need to make sure that we're being respectful and thoughtful about about all of the great communities that our city encompasses.
Does Councillor Wilson wish to chime in on that question?
I'm all good. Thank you, though.
Okay, as a follow-up, I will ask then, so maybe Mayor Horwath, this is sort of a jumping off point then from what you just said. I mean, I think we've seen in previous councils at different times sort of a tendency and maybe natural to become parochial with your interests to serve your constituents. How do you think this bus tour may have addressed that?
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I guess we'll have to wait and see if in fact it does or it doesn't. But what I was hoping to do, and I think that many of the folks that were on the bus would feel that was accomplished, was to create that sense of the bigger picture, if you will. And again, I want to reflect on what Councillor Wilson said about, for example, watersheds and waterways, and how when we think about our city, we don't necessarily think about how these natural features thread together or knit together so many parts of our city. So that happens in a kind of a natural way, if you will, and it has many benefits in terms of biodiversity, etc. But what it also does is physically knit our city together. And I think that these kinds of things, hopefully, as we spoke about them or heard about them today, will be remembered and can be raised, I think, in the discussion and debate as we go through these next 4 years. It did give everybody who was attending, I think, a baseline, if you will, of from which we can have a further discussion, whether that's changing, for example, or improving the scenic drive kind of pathways with the fencing, and we got a couple of chuckles out of some of the councillors certainly along that route. But if you remember, we started in Councillor Jackson's ward in Ward 6, and we finished over completely on the other side of the city, but it was still the same. It was the escarpment, and wouldn't it be fantastic if we could connect all of the pathways to have the same standard of beauty and accessibility and usability in terms of multi-use access from one end of the escarpment to the other across our entire city. So instead of this being something that Councillor Pauls might raise or Councillor Spadafora might raise, now I think we all have a picture of what that vision would look like if it was realized. And maybe people won't see it as a parochial effort for this ward or the other, but rather a city building exercise when it comes to the escarpment.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Tevia. Next, we'll go to Joey Coleman with the public record. Joey, you can go ahead.
Thanks. Tevia and I are in the same spot. So the question I have is on transit. You saw how large the city is, and it's going to be a challenge to provide transit to all of it. How does today's bus program inform your thinking on transit?
Well, what I think happened today is a real picture into the distances that we need to cover if we are actually going to be able to provide transit in one way or another to our entire city, and the extent to which that effort is going to take us some time. the other piece, I think, though, is that in the interim, there are pockets where the demand is higher and or where the need is greater. What I was happy to hear is a number of councillors talk about the blast network and the kind of the master plan, if you will. And I felt very good about the buy-in in terms of that master plan, or that huge transportation transit plan. The issue is going to be the distances, as I said, the buy-in from communities in terms of whether they feel that they need the transit or not, because that came up as well. But also the fiscal capacity. How do we make sure we have the the capacity to build out the system?
No follow-up questions, Joey? Okay. With that, we'll go back to the top of the list. We have a little bit more time. So Nathan, I'll go back to you if you have any follow-up questions. Nathan, you are on mute. You're okay.
I was just saying I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Nathan. Next, we'll go to Lisa from 900 CHML. Lisa, any follow-up questions?
No, I'm good. All my follow-ups were asked by other journalists, so thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And Tevye, over to you. Any follow-up questions?
Sure. I'm interested in the fact that an emphasis was placed on the areas of the urban boundary that are have expanded, in fact, and the proposed parts of the greenbelt that could be taken out. And I say I'm interested because these are decisions that are in the hands of the province, or being forced upon the city by the province, whereas other parts of the city, arguably you could say, well, these are in the hands of the local decision makers, right? Whether to put a bike lane in or not, depending on what funding is available. So why do you think it was important, or why did this group deem it important to tour those areas, or to emphasize those areas? And I'll throw that out to Mayor Horwath and Councillor Wilson, please.
Thanks, Tevye. That's another good question. I think that the importance was, I'm just going to use a little prop here. When you look at a map that has color on it and shows these little parcels where the green belt is going to get eaten into, or where there's going to be urban boundary expansion that was ordered by the province. This is a piece of paper. It's one-dimensional, and you look at it and say, wow, that's going to have an impact. It's different than when you feel it as you're driving along the roadways and you're looking at the farmland, and you're looking at the other heritage, the environmental heritage, or the existing uses, which are largely farmland. How many farms did we see? How many different types of farms did we not only see, but then heard about the one that's down the road, and that's also being captured by the change to the urban boundary. We saw one that was completely different out in Stony Creek, which I know planning department and council has dealt with a couple of times in the past, and so it's. For me, it really was important to get a look at these pieces, these parcels, because it created a sense of scale. I think scale and impact that the boxes on a map don't give you. Councillor Wilson, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, nothing to add for me. I think that really covers it.
Thank you. And Tevye, any follow-up?
No, thanks very much. Yeah, excellent.
Thanks, Tevye. And Joey, you're okay. Thanks very much. Okay, with that, I think we will close out this media briefing. I wanted to thank Mayor Horwath, Councillor Wilson, and members of the media for joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. And I would say to members of the media, if you have any follow-up questions, please send those my way. I'd be happy to work with you to get any other answers or other pieces of information that you're looking for. Happy to help with that. Okay, thanks everyone, and have a great evening. Take good